Inside a local workshop, a metal lathe operates at speed. As the operator adjusts their stance, loose clothing moves closer to the rotating spindle. Never approach a running lathe while wearing loose clothing, untucked shirts, extended sleeves, jewelry, or unsecured accessories. Inside a textile factory, a worker approaches a high-speed winding drum to address a developing issue. Instead of stopping the line, he moves closer, entering the machine's hazard zone. Never reach toward an active roller, drum, or material nip point while equipment remains in motion. In a crowded urban block, an excavator begins removing an unauthorized structure. Almost immediately, movement transfers into the surrounding buildings. Never proceed with demolition or structure removal without a comprehensive structural engineering assessment of all neighboring properties. In a dusty transport yard, a worker approaches the rear ramp of a heavily loaded flatbed, unaware that the load is beginning to shift. Never stand beneath or linger near the rear overhang of a loaded transport vehicle that hasn't been mechanically stabilized. A rider begins unloading his dirt bike down an aluminum ramp. When the front wheel turns slightly off-center, the bike loses stability. Never allow the front handlebars to turn while backing a motorcycle down an incline. To prevent this situation, walk the bike down slowly while maintaining a firm grip on both handlebars. On a backyard patio, a man climbs onto a wooden pergola to reposition an air conditioning unit. When he transfers his weight onto the crossbeam, the lightweight timber begins to shift. Never use decorative architectural features such as pergolas, trellises, or sunshades as load-bearing work platforms. Above a busy highway intersection, a worker repairs a traffic signal from an aerial lift positioned over an active lane. An approaching semi-truck passes beneath with limited overhead clearance. Never position an aerial lift basket directly over an active traffic lane without implementing a full road closure or installing rigid overhead clearance protection. A worker climbs near the top of an aluminum A-frame stepladder to complete a task high on the wall. As she extends her reach, her weight shifts beyond the ladder's stable range. Never stand on the top rungs of an A-frame stepladder or lean your upper body outside the vertical side rails. On an active factory floor, an operator reaches across the flatbed of an industrial die-cutting press to adjust material. As his arms enter the operating area, the machine cycle engages. Never bypass a machine's safety guards or reach into the active point of operation of an industrial press while the power is engaged. On an urban street, a pedestrian walks beside a flatbed truck carrying stacked precast concrete blocks. As he walks past, an unsecured slab begins to shift. Never walk, stand, or linger directly beside the unsecured cargo of a loaded flatbed truck. In a residential backyard, a worker finishes a manual tree cut. As the tree commits to its fall, the operator stays close, trying to influence its direction. Never attempt to push, steady, or manually guide a tree once it begins to move. The mass and leverage involved far exceed human capability, and remaining near the stump places the operator in the area with the least available time and space to reposition safely. Directional control must be established before cutting begins. Use ropes, tag lines, or mechanical winches to influence movement from a safe distance and with proper anchoring. A clear retreat path must be identified and kept unobstructed prior to starting the cut. On a busy delivery street, a forklift extends its forks into a parked truck during unloading. A passing motorcyclist doesn't see the steel forks ahead. Operating forklifts in public or shared traffic areas introduces significant visibility and obstruction challenges. Fork extensions are particularly difficult to detect against pavement surfaces or visually complex backgrounds. Any active loading operation conducted on a public street must incorporate formal traffic control measures. High visibility cones, physical barriers, and designated flaggers must be used to stop or redirect vehicle flow. Industrial equipment and public traffic must never occupy the same operational space at the same time. On an industrial street, a forklift prepares to unload with its forks extended into the lane. An approaching cargo trike does not immediately recognize the obstruction. Never extend forklift tines into a traffic lane without high visibility controls in place. Bare steel forks are narrow and can visually merge with asphalt or concrete surfaces. To approaching drivers, they may not be easily distinguishable until the available stopping distance becomes limited. Establish a clearly defined safe perimeter using traffic cones, reflective tape, and warning signage before entering any shared roadway. In a busy cargo yard, a woman walks across open pavement as a forklift approaches carrying a large crate. The elevated load blocks the operator's forward view. Forklift operators must never drive forward when their line of sight is obstructed by a bulky load. Likewise, pedestrians must never walk through active equipment lanes. When a large crate blocks forward vision, the equipment presents a substantial operational risk to anyone unknowingly entering its movement path. To prevent this type of situation, operators are required to travel in reverse when transporting oversized loads. In a narrow courtyard, workers place an extension ladder on stacked cardboard boxes to gain height. As the weight shifts upward, the boxes compress unevenly, reducing the base stability. Never place a ladder on top of boxes, crates, tables, or any compressible material to increase working height. Ladders require a firm, non-compressible foundation to maintain proper friction and predictable stability. Cardboard compresses inconsistently under concentrated load. Once the base sinks or shifts, the ladder's angle changes immediately, increasing the likelihood of base movement. To prevent this, ladder feet must always rest directly on level, solid ground. On this residential street corner, two men stand engaged in conversation, unaware that a blue delivery truck is reversing toward their position. Never reverse a commercial truck without first verifying rear clearance or using a trained ground spotter. Large delivery vehicles have significant blind zones where mirrors alone do not provide full coverage. When a driver reverses without direct confirmation of the area behind the vehicle, the risk of contacting unseen obstacles increases substantially. To prevent this, drivers must apply the get out and look method before shifting into reverse when visibility is limited. If the rear area cannot be clearly observed, a designated spotter must guide the maneuver using standardized hand signals and continuous communication. On a rural dirt road, a worker stands in the bed of a flatbed truck, guiding a suspended metal container during a crane lift. As tension builds in the rigging, the load shifts unexpectedly. Never position yourself directly under elevated materials or rely solely on the rated strength of lifting slings. Synthetic straps and wire ropes can degrade over time or become compromised by sharp edges and dynamic forces. To prevent this, riggers must thoroughly inspect all slings, shackles, and lifting hardware for fraying, cuts, deformation, or wear before every hoist. Long taglines must be attached to the load so it can be guided safely from ground level at a controlled distance. The truck bed must remain completely clear of personnel during lifting operations. On a bridge construction site, a crawler crane begins a heavy hoist. As the load exceeds the machine's rated capacity, the center of gravity shifts, reducing overall stability. Never attempt a hoist without verifying that the load weight and boom radius remain strictly within the crane's load capacity chart. Every crane has a defined stability threshold. When suspended weight exceeds the counterbalancing leverage of the rear counterweights, controlled balance is reduced, and instability can develop quickly. Lift directors must calculate load weight, rigging weight, and boom angle before any tension is applied. Inside this chemical facility, a worker climbs down a narrow ladder into a containment pit to replace a leaking valve on a large storage tank. But on the slick lower rungs, he loses footing. Never enter a chemical containment pit or attempt live repairs on a leaking hazardous material system without full chemical PPE appropriate to the substance. On a rural farm driveway, a worker begins closing a heavy metal gate while a flatbed truck hauling large equipment is still passing through the exit. The truck's rear clearance contacts the gate frame. Never approach or close a gate while a truck, trailer, or oversized load is passing through. Wide equipment and momentum can snag the gate as clearance tightens, causing it to swing suddenly and create a serious contact risk for anyone nearby. To prevent this, keep a strict exclusion zone and stay clear until the entire vehicle, including the rear of the trailer, has fully exited the gateway. Inside a recycling facility, a worker cuts a retaining wire from a compressed scrap metal bundle. The material immediately begins to move. Never cut binding wires, straps, or restraints on compressed or coiled materials while positioned within the expected movement path. Compacted metal stores mechanical force during processing, and once restraints are removed, that force can be released through rapid repositioning, expansion, or rotational adjustment. Before cutting any restraints, the likely direction of movement must be assessed. Position yourself fully outside that zone and use extended or remote tools to increase separation distance. Where possible, place bundles inside containment frames or restraining systems designed to manage expansion. A construction street. A crane begins lifting a bundled load surrounded by workers. As tension comes on the line, the load shifts sideways. A crane lift must never begin unless the hook is positioned vertically and directly above the load's center of gravity. Proper alignment prevents the development of lateral forces. Any angled rigging introduces horizontal forces as soon as the load clears the ground. To prevent this scenario, the rigger or designated signal person must visually confirm true vertical alignment, commonly referred to as a plumb condition, before authorizing the lift. A clearly defined restricted zone must be established along the load path, and personnel must remain clear of any area between an elevated load and fixed objects such as vehicles, walls, or equipment. At a factory entrance, a white box truck reverses toward the facility's steel gate. Contact with the structure affects the upper guide rollers, and the sliding gate begins to shift out of alignment. Never stand within the movement zone of a sliding gate while vehicles are maneuvering nearby. Sliding gates are engineered to glide along a vertical guide track and are not designed to absorb horizontal vehicle force. When retention rollers are compromised, the gate may lose proper alignment and move beyond its engineered track position under its own weight. Install heavy-duty bollards to protect gate tracks and structural supports from unintended vehicle contact. Drivers reversing in confined spaces must use a trained spotter to prevent contact with structural elements that could compromise heavy assemblies. Inside this living room, a routine home improvement task quickly escalates when a ladder loses stability. Never leave a ladder unsupported on a smooth indoor surface without properly securing its base. Hardwood and laminate flooring provide minimal traction for standard ladder feet, particularly when the ladder is angled over architectural features such as a fireplace hearth. Once the stabilizing support of a human anchor is removed, gravity and weight distribution can quickly overcome surface friction and reduce stability. To prevent this, always use a certified non-slip ladder mat or physically tie off the ladder base when working on polished flooring. If a spotter is used to stabilize the ladder, they must remain in position until the climber has fully descended. Inside a busy glass manufacturing facility, workers attempt to manually reposition a large glass panel. As they push it to the side, the panel balance begins to shift. Never stand directly in the direction of movement when manually adjusting a tall, unsecured vertical load. Large glass crates are top-heavy by design. Once the load begins to tip beyond its balanced center line, it may exceed what people can correct by hand. Heavy vertical loads should be moved using specialized equipment such as A-frame transport carts or overhead lifting systems fitted with appropriate attachments. High above a large steel-reinforced excavation zone, a worker attempts to step down from the deck of a loaded flatbed truck without verifying his footing. Never step down facing forward from the deck of a truck, especially when parked near an unprotected elevation change or trench. A flatbed deck sits several feet above ground level. Exiting without maintaining secure handholds or visual confirmation of footing significantly increases the probability of a loss of balance event. To prevent this, always face the vehicle and maintain 3 points of contact when mounting or dismounting heavy equipment. Drivers must establish safe parking distances away from trenches or elevation transitions whenever possible. A flatbed truck loaded with timber begins rolling forward on an incline. A worker moves into the vehicle's path, placing himself within the potential crush zone. Never attempt to physically stop a rolling commercial vehicle by placing your body in its path of travel. A fully loaded truck possesses substantial kinetic energy once braking control is lost. Stepping between a moving vehicle and a stationary object creates a restricted clearance zone that creates a high-risk crush zone. To prevent this, drivers must consistently engage parking brakes, leave manual transmissions in gear, and use heavy-duty wheel chocks whenever parking on any grade. If a vehicle begins to roll unattended, immediately move clear of its travel path and prioritize personal safety. On this active factory floor, a worker guides a large pane of glass suspended from a suction lift using one hand. When he steps back and releases his grip, the top-heavy panel shifts beyond its balance point. Never rely on a single-handed grip to stabilize a large suspended load during movement or staging. Large glass panels behave like broad, fragile surfaces that can shift unexpectedly. If physical guidance is removed too early, balance control can be lost quickly. Material handlers must use mechanical A-frame supports or secure tag lines when staging oversized glass. Workers should maintain full attention and active control while loads remain suspended. Once center of gravity alignment shifts outside the support base, materials can move downward without warning. On this urban sidewalk, a worker attempts to manually lift a massive industrial cabinet onto the delivery truck's bed, but it didn't go as planned. Never attempt to manually lift or balance a top-heavy, oversized load onto a flatbed truck without mechanical hoisting equipment or a secured ramp system. Large industrial enclosures have an extremely high center of gravity. Once the base is tilted against the edge of the truck deck, it can create a powerful pivot point that quickly overcomes human strength. To prevent this, transport crews must strictly utilize liftgates, forklifts, or engineered incline ramps when transitioning heavy, unbalanced equipment. In a construction environment, an operator carefully backs a cat skid steer down steep, narrow ramps. As the machine tips onto the incline, its balance begins to change. This situation illustrates a failure to follow the heavy-end uphill rule. Skid steers have a short wheelbase, and when the bucket is empty, the engine places more weight toward the rear of the machine. By backing down the ramp, the operator positioned the heaviest portion of the machine on the downhill side, allowing the center of balance to move beyond a stable range. To prevent this, always keep the heaviest end of the machine facing uphill. When the bucket is empty, drive forward down the ramp, only back down a ramp when carrying a heavy load in the bucket. In addition, never use narrow or portable ramps for heavy equipment. In a dim loading area, a worker walks beside a tall container, assuming the path below is clear. Above him, a heavy item is released near the container's edge. Never release or lower objects from height without positively confirming that the area beneath is clear and controlled. Objects accelerate quickly under gravity, and people below may have no warning or opportunity to reposition once movement begins. Always visually confirm the landing zone immediately before release. Use physical barriers such as cones, tape, or rails to prevent access to drop zones. When visibility is limited, assign a spotter. Audible warning support. Awareness, but physical control is mandatory. The standard is to verify, barricade, and communicate every time. In this area, a routine inspection takes place beneath a rain-affected roadway. Saturated soil conditions cause the surrounding ground to start moving unexpectedly. Never enter or stand at the edge of an unprotected trench, cavity, or excavation, particularly following rainfall. Water significantly reduces soil cohesion, increasing the likelihood of sudden ground movement. All excavations exceeding 5 feet, that's about 1.5 meters in depth, must be protected using trench boxes, engineered shoring systems, or properly designed sloping. A qualified, competent person must evaluate soil conditions before work begins. Visual appearance alone is not a reliable indicator of subsurface stability. In a snowy demolition zone, a worker removes a key support column while positioned beneath the roof. The overhead structure starts to move. Never remove a load-bearing support while positioned within the structure's projected movement area. Structural loads transfer immediately when a primary column is removed. Once integrity conditions change, gravity redistributes weight without delay. Anyone remaining within that transfer zone is exposed to an elevated hazard condition. Use mechanical equipment, such as an excavator, with a grapple to remove supports from a controlled distance. If manual dismantling is required, install temporary shoring systems to carry structural loads before altering primary members. Inside an open-front auto supply shop, a worker guides a white SUV into the workshop when unintended. Acceleration occurs during the maneuver. Never stand directly in the travel path of a running vehicle while attempting to guide it. This creates a direct exposure zone. Pedal misapplication or transmission response errors can cause unintended forward movement, transforming a slow maneuver into a sudden approach. Spotters should always guide vehicles from the side at approximately a 45-degree angle, where the driver can clearly see them in mirrors without placing them in the direct path of travel. Always maintain a clear sideways exit route during any vehicle positioning task. High atop a transport truck, a worker stands on a narrow side gate rail. Another worker nearby prepares to release the latch, unaware that someone is on the rail. Never use a truck's side gate as a working platform. Side rails are engineered to contain cargo within the truck bed, not to support concentrated human weight. Because they are hinged components, their stability depends on latch engagement and hinge condition. If the latch is released, bumped, or shifts unexpectedly, the gate can swing open immediately, removing stable support with little warning. Always stand on the truck bed itself or use a secured ladder when accessing elevated cargo areas. Before operating any latch or hinge mechanism, visually confirm that no one is positioned on or near the component. On this rural road, two riders on a motorcycle stop directly behind a large transport truck, unaware that they are positioned inside a critical rear blind zone. Never stop directly behind the trailer of a commercial transport truck. This area is a significant rear blind zone where mirrors provide no direct visibility. When a truck reverses without confirming the clearance behind it, any unseen vehicle or pedestrian in that space is exposed to elevated operational risk. To prevent this, motorcyclists and other drivers must maintain a minimum 30-foot following distance and avoid lingering behind heavy trucks. In a staging yard, a worker guides a concrete pump hose. The boom moves too close to overhead power lines, creating an electrical hazard for nearby workers. Never operate a concrete pump boom or high-reaching machinery within the minimum approach distance of active power lines. Metal frameworks and wet concrete create conductive pathways. Even without direct contact, high-voltage electrical energy can bridge air gaps if clearance is insufficient. Site managers must conduct overhead hazard assessments before deploying aerial equipment and establish clearly marked exclusion zones. On this storefront sidewalk, a delivery crew moves a tall, top-heavy pallet of bottled water with a manual pallet jack. But as the wheels cross uneven pavement, the load tips sideways. Never attempt to transport a towering, unsecured, and top-heavy load with a manual pallet jack across sloped or uneven pavement. Liquid cargo shifts dynamically, and when hundreds of pounds of water are stacked high on a narrow wheelbase, the center of gravity becomes extremely unstable. To prevent this, distributors must break down oversized loads into manageable heights before attempting manual transport over public sidewalks. Furthermore, if a heavy pallet begins to tip, workers must immediately let go and move clear of the load movement zone. Two workers carry a massive pane of glass directly across a road, but before they can clear the lane, a fast-moving motorcycle makes contact with the glass. Never carry large, unflagged sheets of glass across an active roadway without proper traffic control. Transparent panes can reflect the surroundings, making the barrier difficult for approaching drivers to see. To prevent this, transport crews must meticulously mark all clear materials with high visibility painter's tape or flags before they ever leave the staging area. Furthermore, anytime material movement intersects with a live vehicle lane, you must deploy dedicated ground spotters to actively halt traffic before the load crosses the threshold. Inside a garage workshop, mechanics access an elevated truck using ladders. The vehicle isn't fully immobilized, and a small shift causes everything to go wrong. Never perform maintenance on a vehicle without physically securing it against movement. Transmissions and parking brakes alone are not sufficient controls. Any loss of holding force can allow gravity to initiate movement. Before work begins, place wheel chocks on both sides of the tires. Confirm transmission position and fully engage the parking brake. Where possible, use jack stands or lifts with mechanical locks. The vehicle must be verifiably stationary before ladders, leaning, or elevated access is introduced. Inside a warehouse, a forklift brushes a racking upright in a narrow aisle. What looks like a minor contact begins affecting multiple rack sections. Never operate powered industrial equipment while fatigued or distracted. Storage racking systems are engineered primarily for vertical load distribution and are not designed to absorb lateral contact forces. Even minor contact with a load-bearing upright can compromise system alignment. Protective column guards or bollards must be installed at all. Exposed racking uprights. Fatigue management policies must be enforced, and forklift travel speeds must be reduced in narrow aisles to allow sufficient correction time and spatial awareness. In an open-air workshop, a forklift lowers a wide plywood load as a worker crouches in front of it. The operator cannot see the ground-level area ahead. Lowering a load without direct line of sight creates a restricted visibility placement. Risk. Wide materials such as plywood panels obscure ground-level positioning zones. If communication is incomplete or visual confirmation is absent, the space directly in front of the forklift becomes an elevated operational risk area for anyone positioned there. Operators must wait for a confirmed all-clear signal from a designated spotter before lowering loads. Pedestrians must avoid positioning themselves beneath or directly in front of elevated materials. During residential deck construction, an unsecured joist shifts overhead while a worker remains positioned below. Unsecured overhead materials create a severe drop zone hazard during construction activities. When heavy lumber is placed into position without immediate fastening, minor vibrations, shifts, or tool contact can dislodge it. Safe framing practices require that every overhead beam be clamped, tacked, or fully fastened immediately upon placement. Ground personnel must remain aware of overhead positioning activities and avoid standing directly beneath temporarily supported materials. In a quiet courtyard, a woman climbs a wooden ladder leaning against a smooth wall. As she nears the top, the ladder's base begins to shift slightly. Never climb a ladder placed on a smooth surface without securing the base or confirming the correct angle placement. If the ladder angle is too shallow, the horizontal force at the base increases significantly. When that increased force combines with low friction surfaces and unsuitable footwear, it can overcome resistance and cause base sliding or drifting. Always follow the 4-to-1 placement rule. For every 4 feet of vertical height, position the base 1 foot outward from the wall. Anchor ladder feet with sandbags, rubber mats, or physical stop blocks when working on slick surfaces. On a residential construction site, a worker walks across exposed metal framing and steps onto an unbolted steel joist. The beam then shifts under off-center pressure. Never walk across unsecured joists or skeletal frameworks without temporary decking or elevated protection systems in place. Steel members that are not yet welded or bolted lack lateral restraint and can rotate or shift when loaded unevenly. Install temporary planking or structural decking before navigating open framing grids. Treat every unsecured structural component as potentially mobile until it is permanently fastened, inspected, and verified. On a busy urban street, a boom lift reverses down a steep trailer ramp. As it descends, reduced traction causes the machine to drift off alignment. Never drive a mobile elevating work platform on or off a steep transport ramp without being secured to a properly tensioned mechanical winch. Boom lifts have a high center of gravity and solid rubber tires, which may result in reduced traction on smooth or angled metal surfaces. Once the braking force is exceeded by gravity, the machine may gain momentum beyond the operator's control. To prevent this, transport drivers must use heavy-duty winch lines to control the descent of machinery during loading and unloading. On an industrial street, a forklift descends narrow metal ramps from a flatbed tow truck. An unexpected instability develops. Never load or unload a forklift using trailer ramps without a trained ground spotter and verified ramp alignment. Forklifts have concentrated rear counterweights and elevated centers of gravity. If one tire loses structural support, overall balance is immediately compromised. Ramps must be spaced and secured to match the forklift wheelbase precisely. Operators should descend slowly while following spotter guidance. Seatbelts must always be worn to keep the operator position within the protective overhead guard structure during unexpected movement situations and sudden machine shifts. On this rain-slicked two-lane highway, the driver of an oncoming red flatbed truck misjudges the road's grip and suddenly loses tire traction. Never drive a commercial vehicle at normal highway speed or make sudden steering moves on wet roads. If water builds under the tires, traction can drop quickly, reducing steering and braking control and causing the truck to slide even with driver input. To prevent this, commercial drivers must significantly reduce speed at the first sign of rain so the tire tread can properly channel water away from the contact patch. Furthermore, if your steering begins to feel light or you detect the start of a skid, ease off the accelerator and steer smoothly. Never panic or slam on the brakes. Inside a beverage warehouse, an operator backs a stand-up reach forklift toward a doorway with the mast fully elevated, creating a clear overhead clearance hazard. Never move or maneuver a forklift with the mast raised above the minimum travel height. A fully elevated mast raises the center of gravity, and if it contacts an overhead beam while moving, can quickly destabilize the truck and reduce control. To prevent this, operators must rigorously lower their forks to just a few inches off the floor before ever putting the transmission into gear. Furthermore, you must continuously scan your entire travel path for overhead obstructions, such as doorways, structural beams, and HVAC equipment. On a rural roadway, a loaded transport truck makes a routine turn on soft ground. As the rear tire sinks into the soil, the truck begins to lean. Operating heavy vehicles on compromised ground introduces hidden stability concerns. When soil yields under load, the balance threshold can be exceeded rapidly, creating an expanded side clearance exposure area. Conduct ground assessments before maneuvering on unpaved or soft surfaces. Avoid turning near shoulders, drainage edges, or uneven terrain. Use spotters where visibility or ground conditions are uncertain. Pedestrians must remain well clear of heavy vehicles during turns, especially where footing cannot be relied upon. On a steam-filled production floor, a worker performs routine duties near a ground-level processing vat containing heated liquid. Condensation creates slick walking surfaces around the unguarded opening. Open ground-level vats present a significant exposure risk. Any loss of balance or positional control near an unguarded opening can lead to loss of controlled separation from the process zone. All open vessels must be fitted with fixed guardrails or protective enclosures. Slip-resistant flooring, effective drainage systems, and high-traction mats are essential controls. Proper footwear must be worn at all times in high-moisture production environments. In a busy warehouse, a worker crosses the travel path of a moving forklift. The load being carried blocks the operator's forward view. Never cross the travel path of a forklift without confirmed visual acknowledgement from the operator. The mast assembly, overhead guard, and carried load create significant visual obstructions. Without confirmed awareness, pedestrians entering the travel path are exposed to an elevated operational exposure condition. Use designated pedestrian walkways and stop at all warehouse intersections. Wait for the operator to bring the forklift to a complete stop and signal acknowledgement before crossing. In an open-air repair yard, a worker applies excessive torque to the valve of an unsecured pressurized gas cylinder, compromising containment integrity. Never apply excessive force or use unapproved leverage devices on a pressurized cylinder valve. The compressed gas inside stores significant potential energy. If the valve stem is damaged through over-torquing, the rapid release of pressure can cause uncontrolled cylinder movement with substantial force and unpredictable direction. Every gas cylinder must be treated as a high-energy device. Only manufacturer-approved hand wheels or designated cylinder wrenches should be used. If a valve is stuck or corroded, tag the cylinder as defective and return it to the supplier. Never attempt forceful manipulation and never work on an unsecured cylinder resting. directly on the ground. Inside a warehouse, a worker stands on a pallet elevated by a forklift. The pallet is unsecured on the steel forks, and as the mast adjusts, the platform begins to shift. Never use a standard pallet as a personnel lift. Forklift tines are designed to support materials, not to provide a secure work platform for people. Without mechanical attachment, guardrails, or approved fall prevention systems, a pallet can slide or tilt with minimal movement. Any change in mass tilt or load distribution can cause unintended platform shifting. For elevated work, use certified mobile elevating work platforms such as scissor lifts or approved access platforms. On a rural roadside, two workers stand inside the raised bucket of a backhoe loader to reach a utility pole. The elevated load raises the machine's center of gravity, reducing stability. Never use a front loader bucket as a substitute for a certified aerial work platform. Earth-moving equipment is designed for material handling near ground level, not for safely elevating personnel. Always use approved equipment such as bucket trucks, articulated boom lifts, or scissor lifts for elevated access tasks. Machines must only be operated within their engineered design parameters. Attempting to adapt equipment beyond its intended function significantly increases operational instability. Inside an auto repair shop, a mechanic leans over an open service pit while lowering a heavy metal cover. As the weight shifts outward, his center of gravity moves beyond his stable stance. Never lean your upper body over an unprotected floor opening while handling heavy materials. Extending a heavy object away from your body shifts your balance point forward. When that balance threshold is exceeded, stability can be compromised immediately. To prevent this, heavy pit covers should be slid into position while the worker maintains a wide stance on solid flooring, keeping the load close to the body. For panels requiring vertical placement, mechanical lifting aids or a two-person team must be used to distribute the load safely. In a loading yard, a worker steps away from a flatbed truck as a large steel coil is hoisted overhead. At that moment, a brief equipment malfunction affects the suspended load. Never stand beneath or beside a suspended load during active lifting operations. Overhead lifting systems can experience unexpected equipment performance variations or rigging displacement without prior indication. Establish physical exclusion zones during hoisting and ensure all personnel are clear before loads leave the truck bed. Maintain visual awareness of suspended materials until fully secured. Inside this busy warehouse, a worker stands high on a tall aluminum extension ladder, but as he shifts his weight to maneuver, the unsecured base loses grip. Never use an extension ladder on a smooth surface unless it is secured and stabilized. On polished concrete, low traction can let the ladder feet slide when your weight shifts, causing sudden instability. To prevent this, you must rigorously apply the 4-to-1 angle rule and ensure your ladder is equipped with specialized slip-resistant safety pads. For work on smooth floors, have a second worker stabilize the base or secure the ladder before climbing. On this demolition site, two workers try to push down a heavy, unsupported mud and wood wall by hand. But as force is applied, the entire structure fails in an unintended direction. Never stand within the potential collapse radius of an unsupported freestanding wall during manual demolition. Once a structural wall is compromised and separated from its framing, its center of gravity becomes entirely unstable. The moment you apply manual force, the heavy mass of earth and timber can pivot and fall in any direction. To prevent this, workers should utilize long-reach mechanical equipment or engineered cabling systems to safely pull walls down from a distance, rather than relying on human strength. At a bakery, a worker steps onto a freight lift to help reposition a loaded tray. The added weight pushes it beyond its designed operating limit. Never ride on a freight elevator, goods lift, or dumbwaiter unless it has been specifically designed, tested, and certified for passenger use. These systems are intended exclusively for material transport and do not incorporate the redundant control, monitoring, and occupant protection features required for human use. A freight-only designation represents a strict operational limit, not a flexible guideline. Equipment of this type is engineered to account only for cargo weight and distribution. Introducing a person adds an unaccounted variable that can exceed the system's verified operating envelope, resulting in movement that is no longer governed by its normal control mechanisms. In a roadside yard, a worker manually guides a heavy engine component while it is suspended on a forklift, but things didn't go as planned. Never stand, walk, or reach within a forklift's vertical load zone. Hydraulic systems are designed for controlled movement, not for maintaining static support conditions near personnel. A safe separation distance must always be maintained from elevated loads. Taglines or extended positioning tools should be used for alignment tasks. If work must occur nearby, loads must be mechanically supported using approved blocking or support stands. At a loading bay, a forklift drives into the rear of a delivery truck during operations. While the forklift remains inside, the truck unexpectedly begins to move forward. When a truck moves while a forklift bridges the gap, the support surface may no longer remain aligned. The forklift transitions from supported equipment to a misaligned support condition, resulting in a rapid loss of stable alignment at the dock interface. Facilities must implement vehicle restraint systems, such as dock locks or properly installed wheel chocks, to prevent trailer movement. Drivers should follow key control or lockout-style procedures to ensure the vehicle cannot be operated until loading is complete and the forklift has exited the trailer safely. At this brickyard, an operator attempts to transport an extremely heavy stack of masonry pavers. As the forklift reverses, the load shifts the machine's center of gravity forward. Exceeding a forklift's rated capacity leads to immediate center of gravity displacement. Forklifts operate on a fulcrum principle. When load weight shifts beyond the front axle's stability triangle, steering and braking effectiveness are significantly reduced. The equipment becomes unstable and increasingly difficult to control, even on level ground. Operators must verify cargo weight against the forklift's data plate before lifting. Dense materials such as masonry should be divided into smaller loads and transported low to the ground to preserve stability. On a narrow coastal roadway, a concrete mixer travels close to the outer shoulder. The concentrated weight reduces ground support near the edge. Never operate heavy vehicles near the unreinforced boundary area of a roadway or along a steep roadside edge. The outer shoulder is often the least reinforced section of pavement. When significant weight is applied near this boundary, soil can shift beneath the surface layer, reducing support and making the edge less reliable for heavy loads. Maintain a safe standoff distance from roadway boundaries and elevation changes. In an industrial yard, a mobile crane lowers a large metal framework onto a flatbed truck. As the load extends outward, the operating radius exceeds the crane's rated capacity, reducing stability. Never lower or extend a load without confirming that the final operating radius remains within rated capacity. As the boom angle changes, leverage increases proportionally. If that leverage exceeds engineered limits, structural balance may be reduced. Lift plans must calculate load capacity for the final set-down position, not solely the initial hoist point. Operators must continuously monitor load moment indicators and respond immediately if readings approach maximum thresholds. In a retail store aisle, a worker climbs onto the top cap of an aluminum stepladder to reach a high shelf. As he shifts his weight upward, the ladder repositions and loses stable footing. Never stand on the top step or cap of an A-frame stepladder. The top cap is not designed as a standing surface. When a worker's center of mass rises above the ladder's side rails, the structural stability is reduced, significantly increasing balance instability. Follow the two-step rule and never climb higher than the second rung from the top. Keep your belt buckle positioned between the ladder rails. If additional height is required, step down and obtain a properly sized ladder rather than overreaching. On a loading dock, a worker stands on a large wooden crate resting on elevated forklift forks. As the forklift shifts slightly, the unsecured load crate begins sliding off. Never stand on an elevated forklift cargo as a work platform. Forklift forks are engineered to lift stabilized pallets, not to secure loose cargo supporting dynamic body weight. Workers may only be elevated using an approved safety cage securely attached to the forklift mast. Outside a driveway workshop, a man uses a high heat tool to make a quick modification to a sealed 55-gallon steel drum. But when a spark is produced, leftover vapors inside ignite. Never apply heat sparks or open flame to a sealed drum. Even if it looks empty, leftover fuel, solvent, or chemical residue can produce flammable vapors that may ignite and create dangerous pressure buildup, leading to container rupture. Safe hot work requires treating every previously used container as potentially vapor contaminated until proven otherwise. Inside an open warehouse, a worker stands on a ladder to remove an insect hive while a second worker steadies the base. As the nest is dislodged with a long pole, chaos ensues. Never stand directly beneath a worker dislodging an overhead insect hive. If the nest falls into the drop zone, the spotter may instinctively move away, instantly leaving the ladder without support. To prevent this, use professional pest control with proper protective equipment. Ground personnel must set a strict exclusion zone, and the ladder should be secured to a solid structure rather than relying on a person to hold it. On a factory floor, a heavy steel plate is left balanced upright near a stamping press. A small vibration is enough to make it move. Vertically unsupported materials present an inherent stability concern. A plate resting on its edge has a high center of gravity and minimal base support, making it prone to transition into uncontrolled movement with only a small disturbance. All heavy plates, dies, and components must be stored flat on stable supports or secured in engineered racking systems immediately after handling. Use A-frames, cradles, edge restraints, or dedicated racks designed to prevent tipping. Stability must be mechanically ensured, never assumed. A routine gate adjustment goes wrong when a main support is disengaged, allowing the heavy structure to shift beyond its designed operating range. Large gates and hinged structures store substantial potential energy. When support systems are altered, movement can occur immediately and without controlled resistance. Temporary support stands, safety straps, or bracing systems must be installed before loosening hinges or fasteners. Secondary retention devices must always be used to prevent unintended movement if primary components lose effectiveness. On this factory floor, a worker stands near a freight elevator entrance while a forklift reverses in his direction. Due to rear blind spots, the operator does not detect the pedestrian. Never stand between moving equipment and a vertical service opening or fixed structure. Standard elevator doors are not engineered to resist vehicle contact. When subjected to equipment force, they may deform or displace, exposing a vertical shaft opening that must be treated as a critical safety boundary. Install reinforced bollards in front of elevator landings to restrict vehicle access. Operators must physically turn and confirm blind spot clearance before reversing. Pedestrians must avoid standing within the movement radius of mobile machinery. In this confined industrial alleyway, a worker steps into the equipment lane as a forklift approaches carrying a tall load that blocks the operator's forward view. Transporting oversized materials creates a substantial forward blind area for forklift operators. When vision is obstructed, the operator cannot reliably detect obstacles or pedestrians. Heavy industrial equipment moving without clear sight lines presents a serious shared workspace concern, especially in narrow corridors where avoidance space is limited. Operators must travel in reverse when carrying loads that obscure forward vision or use a trained spotter for guidance. Pedestrians must assume operators may not see them and should avoid active travel lanes entirely. Clear separation between machinery paths and walking routes is essential for risk reduction. In an industrial yard, a worker cuts into a curved steel cylinder with an oxy-fuel torch. When the final section is severed, internal stress redistributes and the metal shifts. Never cut a large curved metal cylinder or coil without first addressing internal stress and potential movement change. Curved metal components often retain residual stress from forming and handling processes. When structural continuity is broken, that stress can change quickly and cause sections to shift or reposition with little warning. Before cutting, secure curved metal with clamps, bracing, or containment methods designed to control movement changes. Inside a stockroom, a worker walks forward while focused on his phone, unaware of an open floor hatch directly ahead. Never walk through active work environments while distracted by a mobile device. Divided attention significantly reduces hazard recognition and environmental awareness. Install high-visibility guardrails or barrier systems around open floor penetrations and ensure protective covers are secured whenever the opening is not actively in use. Establish designated no-phone zones in higher-risk operational areas where floor openings, lift equipment, or mobile carts are present. If device use is necessary, stop walking and relocate to a controlled, hazard-free location. On an active construction site, a concrete mixer reverses toward a deep trench. As it nears the unsupported edge, concentrated weight reduces soil stability. Never operate heavy equipment directly on the edge of an unsupported excavation. The weight of large vehicles exerts downward and lateral pressure on the surrounding soil. If positioned too close to the excavation edge boundary, the ground may lose stability without a visible indication. Heavy equipment must remain set back a safe distance, typically 1 foot for every foot of trench depth, unless otherwise engineered. A competent person must evaluate soil classification and stability before work begins. Workers must never stand between heavy machinery and an open excavation. Soil conditions can change rapidly under load. In a distribution yard, a worker unloads tall pressurized gas cylinders using a hydraulic liftgate. An unsecured cylinder tips, damaging the valve assembly. Never transport or maneuver pressurized cylinders without securing them using approved straps or chains. The valve assembly is the most vulnerable component. If compromised, rapid internal pressure discharge can generate a force sufficient to cause sudden reactive movement. In a busy loading yard, a worker jumps onto the cab area of an idling forklift from an elevated spot. As he tries to climb down the front, the mast shifts backward. Never use a forklift's mast, carriage, or roof as a ladder. The mast is heavy and hydraulically controlled, and a small shift or accidental control contact can move it suddenly and reduce clearance fast. To prevent this, facilities must enforce a strict zero riding policy, ensuring personnel never stand on, jump onto, or climb the exterior of active industrial machinery. Furthermore, if you need to move between elevations, always use designated stairs or engineered ladders, keeping your body completely outside the operational footprint of heavy equipment. Inside a busy warehouse shipping bay, a worker leans into an open trailer to check stacked boxes. Before dock clearance is confirmed, the truck pulls away. Never stand on the unprotected edge of a loading dock or lean into a trailer unless the truck is mechanically secured. If a driver cannot see the trailer threshold and moves on assumption instead of direct communication, the trailer can pull away from the dock and remove the surface that a worker is depending on. To prevent this, shipping facilities should use automatic dock restraints or heavy-duty wheel chocks to keep trucks from moving. In a timber yard, a worker steps onto a stack of rough-cut logs to get a better view. Nearby vibration causes the rounded logs to begin shifting beneath him. Never walk or stand on unsecured log stacks. Rounded timber relies on friction rather than mechanical restraint, and even small disturbances can initiate movement. Treat log stacks as active loads, not platforms. Secure stacks with chocks, wedges, cribbing, or engineered restraints. Personnel must remain on designated ground-level walkways. 4. Elevated inspection. Use approved access equipment designed for stability, not personal balance on material. Outside an industrial facility, a forklift travels with its mast raised too high. The elevated load shifts the load balance, reducing stability as it moves. Transporting loads at elevated heights significantly reduces forklift stability. As load height increases, the margin for corrective adjustment decreases. Forklift operators must follow the travel low principle, keeping loads only inches above the ground during movement. Pedestrian rest zones must be physically separated from active material handling routes. On an elevated industrial platform, a worker operates a utility vehicle near the platform boundary, and it didn't go as planned. Operating mobile equipment near unprotected platform edges creates an edge exposure hazard. Visual perception from a seated position can distort depth awareness. Once the vehicle's center of gravity shifts beyond the supported surface, stability correction becomes difficult and recovery may be limited without engineered barriers. High on a residential construction site, carpenters complete a cut on an overhanging roof beam, releasing stored tension and altering the framing system's stability. Never cut a structural framing member while relying on that same structure for balance or support. Severing a tensioned beam instantly redistributes load forces, destabilizing ladders and temporary platforms. This creates an immediate instability zone where structural movement can occur faster than individuals can safely adjust their positioning. Heavy timber should be cut to final dimensions before installation whenever possible. If trimming is necessary after placement, the structure must be permanently braced first. Workers performing elevated tasks must wear full fall protection harnesses tied to secure anchor points. Near the ceiling of a renovated shop, a worker leans a closed A-frame ladder against a wall to gain extra reach. The base begins sliding backwards on the smooth floor. Never use a closed A-frame ladder as a straight ladder. Step ladders are designed to distribute weight evenly, only when fully opened with the spreaders locked. When leaned closed against a wall, only narrow edges of the feet contact the surface, reducing friction and making sliding more likely. Use step ladders only in their intended, fully open configuration. If angled access is required, select a proper extension ladder designed for that purpose. In a loading bay, a forklift uses a boom attachment to lift a large cylindrical tank. As the load extends forward, the center of gravity shifts, and the load moves to the side. Never lift a load exceeding a forklift's rated capacity, particularly when using attachments that alter load center distance. Attachments reduce allowable lifting thresholds and increase forward leverage forces. Always verify load weight against the forklift's adjusted capacity. Chart, including any derating requirements associated with installed attachments. Maintain clearly defined exclusion zones around elevated loads and ensure bystanders remain outside the operational perimeter. In this industrial maintenance yard, a dump truck raises its hydraulic bed to full height. Without intended activation, the hydraulic system malfunctions. Never position yourself within the movement zone of a raised dump truck bed unless it is secured with an approved mechanical safety prop. Hydraulic systems rely on pressurized fluid to maintain elevation. If seals, hoses, or cylinders malfunction, support pressure may decrease, allowing the bed to descend without mechanical backup support. Mechanics must install engineered steel body props before performing maintenance. Ground personnel must treat a raised dump bed as an active overhead movement area and avoid standing within its travel path while it is unsupported. On a steep hillside path, a rider guides a loaded three-wheeled utility motorcycle around a tight downhill turn, but the heavy vehicle completely loses traction. Never carry excess speed or make sharp steering inputs when operating a loaded cargo tricycle on a steep, narrow downgrade. Three-wheeled vehicles are less stable by design, and a heavy rear load on a downhill slope can reduce traction and make steering harder to control. In that condition, even a single sharp turn can quickly push the vehicle toward the edge of the path. To prevent this, operators must slow to a crawl before entering any downhill curve and use low gears rather than relying solely on the front brake. On a residential street, a crew unloads a forklift using a narrow ramp. As the operator applies the throttle, the acceleration response is stronger than anticipated. Never descend a steep transport ramp without first testing throttle responsiveness and confirming precise ramp alignment. Industrial equipment can respond abruptly depending on gear ratio and torques settings. Use mechanical winches to regulate descent speed when unloading unfamiliar equipment. Operators must remain seatbelted inside the protective frame. Ground workers should stand clear of the active unloading zone to prevent exposure to shifting equipment. Inside a busy car wash bay, a worker stands in front of a customer's SUV to guide it into the tunnel, but a pedal misapplication causes the vehicle to surge forward unexpectedly. Never stand directly in front of a running vehicle to guide it. A small driver error can cause sudden forward movement, creating a serious impact and a trapping hazard. Safe vehicle intake protocols require ground spotters to stand strictly off to the side, maintain clear visual contact through the driver's window, and remain completely outside the forward travel zone. Facilities should prioritize mirror-guided entry systems or automated track alignments that eliminate the need for personnel in the hazard area. In a valve workshop, a hydrostatic test is performed on a large iron fitting at an open bench. As pressure is applied with the operator nearby, an internal defect causes the fitting to fail suddenly. Open bench pressure testing exposes operators to extreme stored energy exposure. If a component loses containment, pressurized contents can be released outward at elevated flow speed. This risk must be addressed through engineered containment systems. All pressure testing must occur within rated enclosures designed for the pressure class and component type. Controls must be operated remotely from behind protective barriers. The requirement is clear: contain the energy, separate the operator, and control the test remotely, so any loss of containment is absorbed by the enclosure, not the workspace. On a rain-soaked loading dock, a worker rides the front of a moving forklift, placing themselves directly within a dangerous clearance zone. Never ride on forklift forks, masts, or exterior surfaces. Forklifts are designed exclusively for material handling and do not provide protection for riders. A strict exclusion zone must be enforced around operating forklifts. Pedestrians may only approach once the machine is fully stopped, controls are neutralized, and the operator provides a clear signal indicating safe access. On a roadway, a motorcyclist travels alongside a loaded truck. During vehicle movement, unsecured freight shifts and falls off the truck. Transporting cargo without verified securement creates a load containment exposure. During acceleration, braking, or turning, loads experience dynamic force redistribution. If tie-down systems are insufficient, damaged, or improperly rated, materials may shift beyond the trailer boundary and enter surrounding traffic lanes. Drivers must follow regulated cargo securement standards, ensuring tie-down systems are properly rated for the full load weight and rechecked after departure. Motorcyclists should avoid prolonged positioning alongside heavy trucks. A crane starts lifting a steel beam, but the hook isn't centered. As it is lifted, the beam moves to the side. Initiating a lift without a vertically aligned hoist line creates a lateral shift condition. When the crane block is offset from the load's center of gravity, applied tension causes immediate horizontal movement. Personnel standing beside the load may be exposed to serious contact and pinch point exposure as the load repositions itself beneath the hook. Riggers must confirm the crane hook is centered and plumb before signaling the lift. All workers must clear the immediate deck area before tensioning begins. In a sand processing yard, a worker steps into the bucket area of a wheel loader as it prepares to scoop material. The operator's forward view is limited by equipment blind zones. Never enter the operating zone or loading area of heavy earth-moving equipment without confirmed visual communication with the operator. Large buckets create blind areas that can conceal nearby personnel. Equipment movement can begin while the operator remains unaware that someone is positioned close to the machine. All ground personnel must wear high-visibility clothing and stay within designated pedestrian routes. Operators and workers must establish clear eye contact and agreed hand signals before anyone approaches the machine. On a factory floor, a worker stands close to an operating wire-winding drum, placing himself within the rotating equipment's entanglement zone. Never reach into or stand within the operating envelope of rotating machinery. Industrial motors generate significant torque, and once material becomes engaged within a moving assembly, inward mechanical force can draw items toward rotating components rapidly. Follow lockout and tagout procedures before servicing, clearing obstructions, or adjusting feet alignment. Keep hands, clothing, and accessories clear of powered rotating systems. Inside a machine shop, two workers stand near a fully raised commercial overhead door. A tension component fails, and the heavy steel door begins moving downward. Never stand or hold extended conversations beneath an open overhead roll-up door. These doors rely on high-tension torsion springs and lift cables to counterbalance their weight. If a spring or cable loses functional reliability, there may be no backup retention mechanism to control unexpected vertical movement. Facilities must conduct routine inspections of door springs, brackets, and cables. Employees should move through door thresholds efficiently and avoid lingering within the door's travel path. Overhead components must always be treated as potential gravity-related risk. Inside a wood processing facility, a worker moves through a narrow clearance as the panel shifts laterally, creating a pinch point hazard. Never enter the travel path of materials being fed into automated machinery. Moving panels driven by powered rollers can shift position without warning. Facilities must establish marked exclusion zones around active feed tables. Workers should always use designated walkways when crossing production lines. Taking shortcuts near energized machinery increases exposure to mechanical movement hazards, especially when the machine is actively applying forward pressure that can redirect materials unexpectedly. At a busy renovation site, a worker stands in an elevated boom lift basket while the machine moves. When the rear tires drop into an unseen dip, the sudden jolt whips the platform. Never drive a boom lift over uneven ground or drop-offs while someone is elevated in the basket. Small wheel drops can create large platform movement, so use required fall protection and only operate on stable terrain. To prevent this, ground spotters and operators must carefully clear the entire travel path before moving the machine, identifying and physically marking any soft soil, trenches, or elevation changes. Furthermore, this event clearly demonstrates why workers in the basket must use a full-body harness and short restraint lanyard attached to the engineered anchor point when required. Inside a manufacturing plant, an overhead crane lifts a large industrial engine while a worker remains below, creating an immediate suspended load hazard. Never stand beneath, reach under, or position your body within the path of a heavy suspended load. Lifting slings, chains, and hoists operate under extreme tension, and if a rigging point or mechanical connection fails, the load can drop without warning and damage anything below. To prevent this, rigging crews must establish and enforce a strict exclusion zone before any lift begins, keeping all ground personnel clear of the area. If a load needs to be guided or positioned during a hoist, workers should use long tag lines from a safe distance. When components fail during lifting, there is often no time to react safely. In a fabrication hall, a worker adjusts a fitting on a pressurized system during maintenance. The seal gives way without warning. Never loosen fittings, remove fasteners, or open valves on any system that may still contain pressure. Pressurized air, steam, gas, or fluid represents stored energy that must be fully relieved before work begins. Follow strict zero-energy verification procedures. Isolate the system, apply lockout/tagout, confirm with gauges, and open approved vent points to verify pressure relief. Stand clear of projected release paths and use barriers where appropriate. Verification is mandatory. Confirm zero pressure, confirm zero flow, then proceed, never in reverse. In an active aggregate yard, a worker stands in the travel path of a moving wheel loader. With the bucket raised, the operator's forward view is severely limited. Wheel loaders have inherent forward visibility limitations caused by the bucket and lift arms. When material is carried, the operator's view of the travel path can be obstructed for several meters, creating a visibility zone where ground personnel may not be easily detected from the cab. To prevent this, ground workers must treat equipment travel paths as restricted areas unless clear eye contact has been established with the operator. Operators should keep the bucket as low as practical during travel to improve visibility. If forward visibility is obstructed, the loader should be operated in reverse or guided by a trained spotter. On this factory floor, a worker stands near a large steel coil secured with tensioned banding. Without warning, the band releases unexpectedly. Coiled materials store significant potential energy. When banding releases unexpectedly, that stored energy can discharge rapidly. Improper stacking configurations or insufficient guarding increase the likelihood of outward material movement beyond the designated storage footprint. Install heavy-duty coil guards or engineered retention cages capable of containing band release events. In a garage workspace, a painter overreaches from the top of an A-frame stepladder, creating a fall hazard. Never, ever allow your belt buckle to pass outside the side rails of a ladder. This is a serious off-center reach error. Stepladders remain stable only when the weight is centered between all 4 feet. Side overreach turns the body into a liver that can tip the ladder. To prevent this, follow the belt buckle rule at all times. If the work cannot be reached comfortably, climb down and reposition the ladder. On a loading dock, a forklift operator drives into the rear of a trailer at the dock bay, while the truck driver remains unaware that loading has begun. Never enter a trailer or container without verifying that the vehicle is immobilized. If a trailer moves during a forklift transition, the dock plate can shift out of position, reducing surface continuity beneath the forklift. Even a small movement can change the stability of the entry path. Facilities must enforce the use of wheel chocks or automated trailer restraint systems that physically secure trucks to the dock. Implement strict key control or driver lockout procedures so drivers remain clear until loading operations are complete. In a construction staging yard, a worker walks between stacks of metal sheet piles as a crane begins lifting nearby. Lateral force from the rigging causes the unsecured stack to shift sideways. Never stand or pass between stacked heavy materials during active lifting operations. Rigging forces can transfer sideways pressure to adjacent unsecured stacks, influencing material alignment. Maintain clearly defined exclusion zones around lifting activities. Inside a warehouse, a worker climbs an aluminum extension ladder near a structural beam. As his weight shifts upward, reduced traction at the base causes the ladder to slide outward. Never climb an extension ladder without securing the base and ensuring adequate surface traction. When placed on polished or dusty concrete, friction levels may be insufficient to resist the outward force created by climbing movement. Apply the 4-to-1 angle rule for proper ladder positioning. Equip ladder feet with slip-resistant pads. For elevated tasks on smooth flooring, have a second worker stabilize the base or tie off the ladder at both top and bottom anchor points. Stable anchoring is essential for safe vertical access. On a construction site, a mobile crane performs a blind hoist over a wall. The suspended load exceeds safe capacity, shifting the crane's center of gravity beyond its outrigger support base. Never conduct a hoist without verifying load weight and boom radius remain within approved capacity limits. Every crane has a defined stability threshold determined by leverage geometry and counterweight balance. Lift directors must confirm all variables before lifting begins. Operators must immediately stop operations if overload indicators activate. Stability depends entirely on accurate load calculations and adherence to manufacturer guidelines, because even a small capacity exceedance can shift leverage geometry enough to reduce safe support margins rapidly. In a flooded field, a tractor operator pushes hard to break free from deep mud. But as engine force increases, the front wheels lift and the tractor tips backward into a rollover. Never aggressively throttle the engine or drop the clutch when a heavy tractor is deeply bogged down and the rear wheels are immobilized. When large rear tires are locked in dense mud, the engine's rotational force may no longer be able to turn the wheels forward. Instead, that force can redirect through the chassis and rotate the tractor upward around the rear axle. To prevent this, stop the recovery attempt as soon as the tractor loses forward movement and the tires keep digging. Reduce power, then recover the tractor with properly rated equipment attached to the correct recovery point, following the manufacturer's guidance. 2 workers stand in the load path as an overhead crane hoists a massive steel cylinder from a flatbed truck. A rigging instability creates an immediate suspended load hazard. Never hoist a smooth cylindrical load with a standard basket hitch using bare metal chains, and never stand within the possible movement range of a live crane lift. Smooth steel provides very little grip against metal chains, so if the load shifts or the crane angle changes, the rigging can slip off and the load can move unpredictably. To prevent this, riggers should use synthetic web slings in a double-wrap choker hitch so the sling tightens around the load as tension is applied. Ground crews must also establish a strict exclusion zone before the lift begins. In this material handling area, a worker manually releases a dump truck's tailgate. As the truck bed begins to elevate, internal load forces shift unpredictably. Never remain within the discharge area of a raised dump bed. Once elevation begins, load behavior becomes variable and difficult to predict. Tailgate release mechanisms should be operated from within the cab whenever possible. Manual releases must be completed before raising the bed. In a busy commercial kitchen, a worker turns near a row of stock pots, unaware that grease and moisture on the tile floor have reduced traction beneath his footwear. Entering a high-volume kitchen without slip-resistant footwear significantly increases fall potential. Commercial kitchen floors frequently accumulate microscopic layers of oil and water. Without specialized soles designed to channel liquids away, shoes can lose traction instantly when body weight transfers unexpectedly. Workers must wear certified slip-resistant occupational footwear specifically engineered for wet and oily surfaces. In a stone yard, a worker steps onto a stacked granite block to attach rigging. The block rests unevenly, and the additional weight alters how the stack is supported. Never assume stacked materials can support added weight simply because they appear solid. This creates a hidden stability issue where uneven contact points or surface debris may allow movement when pressure is applied. You must confirm that material stacks are level, secured, and approved for access before approaching. Always use ladders or work platforms instead of standing on stacked materials, as visible solidity does not guarantee consistent support.